Not so long ago, 343 Industries updated Halo the Master Chief Collection to include the long-awaited Flood Firefight, which was originally supposed to coincide with the release of the 8th season, Mythic, but was delayed due to complications on the developer end. Now, Flood Firefight is finally here, but was the long wait really worth it? Did the extra time needed help make the Flood Firefight what everyone hoped it would be? In my very own opinion, no, not really. Although my first playthroughs with it were fun and I found myself enjoying it, after a while that feeling quickly faded, and the mode became dull, and I was left wondering why. And after some thought, I pieced together that why. I love the Flood, easily my favorite faction in Halo. So on my journey to find out why Flood Firefight was so dull, I looked back at the Flood, what made them work, and what Flood Fight was getting wrong. When I think of the Flood, and think of why the Flood gives me the effect it does, the first thing that comes to mind is music, the sounds and songs. It's an addition that aids the Flood. For example, taking a look all the way back to Combat Evolved, the mission library. What makes that level so scary, or fills the players full of panic and dread, isn't just the hordes of Flood that keep coming, but the added music of the Flood. Adds a sense of anxiety and panic. While on the topic of audio, the sound effects in Flood Firefight is very subpar. Flood Firefight takes the Flood from Halo 3 and imports them into ODST, which makes sense considering that ODST is an extension of Halo 3, but where the comparisons to how the Flood behave in both ODST and 3 are great, the sound effects are not. In Halo 3, the Gravemind, who met Master Chief in Halo 2, talks through the Flood in Halo 3. When Master Chief combats the Flood, the Gravemind speaks to Chief through them, which makes sense since the Gravemind knows Master Chief. There's a connection between the characters and the player. The Flood in Flood Firefight also use the Gravemind's voice, which doesn't really make sense considering that in ODST Flood Firefight, you play as your own ODST, or one of the pre-selected ODSTs from the ODST campaign, all of which have no connection to the Gravemind nor the Flood, so the idea of him speaking to us as ODST makes no sense, and it would have been cooler for the Flood to make their iconic noises from Combat Evolved in Halo 2.
Here you are, hiding your casket.
The last bit of audio criticism I'd like to give about is the spawn doors. Some of the firefight maps in ODST have doors that the Flood come out of when each round starts. The doors have a siren that goes off, and about 4 Flood come out at a time. It's really underwhelming. Take an example of this mission in Halo Wars 2. Each time the wave of Floods start, they make this mixture of Flood sounds and stampeding, giving a sense of thousands of Flood hordes approaching, truly adding a sense of dread, that there's a large force coming and you're probably not ready to deal with it.
We need more Goliaths. Send them in now. Ready. We are immovable, unstoppable.
Okay, enough about the audio. I understand the audio could have been better. But besides the audio, The last thing I personally think would improve Flood Firefight is the numbers and AI tracking. And I know that the Flood chases you down pretty well, but a lot of them just hang out in the back of the map. If you stay in one spot, they don't all track you down. In the campaign, you have to progress forward, so they have to see you and chase you down. In Firefight, you can hold out, and depending on where you hold out, the Flood won't even find you. You have to hunt them down yourself, losing that sense of panic they're famous for. Lastly, in my opinion, there also aren't enough Flood in around. It's usually 4 or 5 out a door at once, which out of like 6 doors, sure, 24 to 30 Floods sound like a lot, but only 3 or 4 come after you at a time, making it more than manageable. And the games made it seem like a Spartan would even have a hard time dealing with the Flood, but here it seems like a cakewalk for ODSTs. If the Flood came at you more than 5 at a time, it would induce more of the classic Halo panic. In short, Flood Firefight fell flat on its face, but could be fixed if they used what worked from the Flood in campaigns. To be honest, unfortunately, in my own opinion, the hardest, most panicking thing that came out of Flood Firefight was the Sentinels.